Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show. Hi, I'm Paul and I'll be your host this evening. Joining me this evening, I have got Stephen Harris. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, Paul, always always a privilege. We'll start that again. Take two. Yeah, no, good evening, Paul. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM. And, of course, good evening to our viewers on the number one show on a Monday night.
Yes, well, let's narrow it down. The number one show on a Monday night at 8 o'clock that happens to be about New Zealand rugby. Let's not big ourselves up too much about all of this kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening. Well, we've got all sorts of stuff. Obviously, Super Rugby has come to a close, so we'll have a Super Rugby final to talk about. Australia's threatening to leave Super Rugby. Boy, oh boy, isn't that fun in games. We also had some booing at the crowds, which brought up some comments. We'll have a talk about that. There is the Pacific 4 series that has come to a conclusion as well between USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand in the women's rugby. And also we have obviously had the Gallagher Premiership and also the URC finals at the weekend. So we'll do a bit of a comparison of those three games. Stephen, you've got some Auckland club rugby stuff to have a chat about as well. Now, a bit of a non-rugby weekend for us in some ways, because I had a daughter who was not very well, so I stayed home rather than videoing both the A's and B's at Waihi. So sorry about that, folks. Yes, I didn't get out to any grounds. And Stephen, you weren't feeling 100% either, so you didn't make it to any grounds either.
Yeah, little bit off colour, so I had to rely on a few spies about the place here in Auckland to just give me a little bit of information in terms of how things are going. And good evening to Simon Hughes, who is joining us, another one of our regulars. So to be honest, it was a pretty quietish sort of weekend, but managed to take in a little bit of footy. Obviously, the final of Super Rugby, which we'll get to, and caught up with some of the highlights of the Black Ferns in the Four Nations tournament.
Yeah, and look, my best performing tweet of the weekend was my tweet saying on Friday night, "Oh, look, there's no rugby on Friday night. What am I going to do?" So there we go. That was my big tweet of the weekend. My big tweet this coming weekend is, "There's no rugby all weekend. What am I going to do?" Especially as Waihi A's and Waihi B's are both on a bye this weekend. So I've not even got club rugby to go to either, Stephen. So I have no idea what to do with myself. And it's a long weekend, folks, because we've got Matariki for the first time ever in New Zealand is a public holiday on Friday. So it's all a bit of a disaster. A long weekend with no rugby. The powers that be, your scheduling is awful. Why was the Pacific 4 series not this coming weekend and have it in a blank weekend where there wasn't any competition, any other competitions going on apart from the French top 14? This was a great weekend where it could have had the full focus of all the media, but no, let's host those games during Super Rugby finals instead, and where the media is obviously concentrating on that and also having All Blacks announcements. Scheduling, folks. You don't really help yourselves, do you, rugby? But there we go. Simon letting us know the Georgia Black Lions lost in the semi-final of the South African Division 2 in extra time. Well, there we go. Good to see South Africa actually giving Georgia the opportunity for their players to get more exposure. Obviously, those are the players that aren't in the French top 14 or playing professionally overseas in that one. Japan have also kicked off their international season with a game against Uruguay as well. So good win for them there. And Nocturnal writes, a long weekend for the tears of the blues to dry up. Lol. Thank you very much on that one. Nocturnal, it's not like I'm wearing a blues shirt or anything like that this evening, is it? Or that Stephen's in his Northland hoodie. I've still not got one of those from Cam. So Cam Bell, if you're watching, where's my hoodie? Not like you've got two blues fans here that you're having a go at. But thanks, Nocturnal. I can mute you on the chat, but there we go. Mary Dix says, take a break, Paul. Exciting rugby coming up. There is exciting rugby coming up, absolutely. And that's why I want to have a look at and compare the Super Rugby final with the URC final and the Gallagher Premiership final. Because what kind of rugby can the All Blacks expect to face up against Ireland and obviously the Wallabies hosting England? So, Stephen, actually, I'm going to start there rather than and have a look at that. That's a bit of an odd way of doing it. But for those of you who watch, by the way, folks, yes, you can watch us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 8 p.m. on a Monday evening. Obviously, you can catch recordings there as well, or you can listen to us as a podcast. For those people who are listening to the podcast, I've just put up some stats from the 3 games, looking at the number of kicks from hand, the meters run, the number of tackles, and the tackle percentages across the 3 finals that we had at the weekend. So in the Blues versus the Crusaders, we had 54 kicks from hand in that one. With the Stormers versus the Bulls, 87 kicks from hand. Now, look, after we saw those, the British and Irish Lions tour a couple of years ago now, not surprising to see a few more kicks from hand by the South African teams, but more than a kick a minute. Then we get to the Gallagher Premiership, 105 kicks from hand, nearly twice as many kicks as we saw in the Super Rugby. Now, look, kicking in itself isn't necessarily isn't good or bad. Good kicking can be great, but Stephen, a kick, well, more than a kick a minute. That's wow. That really is a bit of a tennis game, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, Paul. It probably actually says that maybe both sides weren't prepared to play too much rugby in their own half. Maybe look for contestable kicks as well. That's what it says, and I think the scoreline probably reflected it at the end of the day. A very, very tight one, and it took a drop goal in the closing minutes to seal the deal. So yeah, definitely a lot of kicking, and that also might reflect in that tackle rate. Although that's still a fair amount of tackles. 86% of tackles made. 83% missed.
So let me just quickly go through it. I'll read the numbers out. The tackles there. So total number of tackles made. So these are the successful tackles. 348 for the Super Rugby final. 233 for the URC and 244 for the Gallagher Premiership. So 100 more tackles in the Super Rugby final. Now, for us, when a lot of the when people have a go at Super Rugby, they talk about the fact of tackling or defence is optional. Clearly not, because there's 100 more tackles. More between 25 and 30% more tackles there. And then the tackle percentages you can see there, folks, are for the 2 teams. So the Blues were 91% successful and 89% successful for the Crusaders. The Stormers 83, whereas the Bulls 87% successful. And then the Leicester and Saracens were 86% successful and 83% successful. So this idea that maybe that there was less kicks in the Blues versus Crusaders because there was less rugby being played. Well, no, because there were 100 more tackles. And those tackles were more successful as well. So defences were better, and yet we still had over 200 more meters running. Well, actually 250 more meters running in the game as well. So a lot more rugby being played in the Blues in the Super Rugby final than there were in the other 2 games. Which I guess, Stephen, for me, I think we're going to see basically similar tactics as we've seen from the Springboks during the Rugby Championship of trying to slow the game down and get the ball out of play as much as possible and just not play as much and not get run off their feet. And we may see similar things for England against the Wallabies, and also, I guess, Ireland against the All Blacks as well.
Yeah, very much a contrast of styles in it, Paul. And all it's about is teams playing to their strengths. So it's a case of whatever it takes. I think it's probably the beauty of rugby union that not every team plays the same way, and of course different styles, and depending on how good your weather is, also dictates the way that you play. We're down here in the southern hemisphere, a little bit drier in that early season. We tend to see a little bit more handling, although we'll get to that final shortly, no doubt. You could also see that still a bit of tactical kicking comes into play depending on the conditions.
Oh, I'd say kicking can be a fantastically offensive weapon. Crossfield kicks, for example, and looks at box kicking again. If you've already got the winger on that side at the bottom of the ruck because you've made a tackle, then fantastic. Do box kick into that space. But it's a matter of how. Yeah, I'd say when you're looking at a kick and a quarter every minute from that in that Premiership final. And yes, it came to a grandstand finish, but I'm not sure it was a fantastic game to watch necessarily. But there you go, folks. Yeah, contrasting styles. So I think it's one of the beauties of rugby. What I guess I don't like is just the game being slowed down. Now, one of the things we saw in the Pacific 4 series was the water carriers were not allowed on the pitch. So it's going to be interesting to see how that changes things and whether we get a bit more flow of the game during that when we see those rules come into effect for the men's games in those the internationals that are coming up. So there you go, folks. That was just my little look at some stats around those different games and what I thought that I did show. But yes, the final then on Friday night, the Blues versus the Crusaders, 7-21. Now, I was listening to a podcast today reviewing this game. They were like, "Oh yeah, during the second half when the Blues looked like they might be making a comeback." I was like, "What game were they watching?" This was an absolute masterclass from the Crusaders on how to dominate an opposition. Now, I've had someone say it wasn't a domination. Look, the score wasn't that big. That's not a domination. It's like, well, okay, the score might not have been that big, but in terms of actual play, the Crusaders had a stranglehold on this game the whole way through, didn't they, Stephen?
I'd have to agree with you, Paul. In fact, I almost found it similar to the Rugby 1919. No, sorry, not 1919. The 2019.
Wow,
that would have been
Stephen,
a long time
you're
ago.
a bit older than I thought.
And maybe my great grandparents were there, but in 2019 we were there, and it was the semi-final of the Rugby World Cup, England versus the All Blacks, and it very much reminded me of that game, Paul, where I think the score really didn't do any sort of justice. It flattered the losing team on both occasions, and there was no comeback. And in fact, they pretty much, to me, sealed the deal right on halftime when Bryn Hall scored. But listen, their start, I thought tactically, the Crusaders were very good. They obviously implemented a plan in and around of disrupting the line out, and a lot of people are actually talking about the throw into the line out and the lack of movement in the Blues line out. But if you talk to really good line out exponents, a lot of the actual line outs actually won on the ground, Paul, by the work that's done by the lifters. And I think the Crusaders, they tactically had it perfect on the night, and they ended up with 10 steals or so, and really that was one component of the game, but one only.
Sure, it is a component of the game, but again, another tweet I put out during the game was that the old saying, pardon me, that no scrum, no win, isn't true anymore. But it should be changed to no line out, no win, because the line out is the most important set piece in that game. We had 30 line outs compared to 16 scrums. Now, 16 scrums for Super Rugby is about mid-table. I've been keeping a track of how many scrums there were all season. But still, you've got twice as many lineouts as you have scrums. So therefore, you have twice as many attacking opportunities, and that's the platform that basically you build your game off. If that platform doesn't exist, which it didn't for the Blues, then your whole game's out the window, and good luck trying to come from that. Now, it's come out that Scott Hansen has spent a month looking at the Blues line out and how to disrupt it, and that it wasn't Whitelock, it was Quinton Strange who was the defensive line out caller, whereas Whitelock was the attacking line out caller. So on their own throw, Whitelock did that, whereas Quinton Strange just concentrated on the defensive one, which again, that's a level of detail that perhaps that fans wouldn't think about. Is that you've given Whitelock one job? Well, I mean, obviously he's got lots of jobs on the pitch, but you've told him, look, just concentrate on our line out and what we do. Quinton Strange will deal with their line out, and that's all he has to concentrate on. And by dividing that between two players, you're giving them, obviously they can spend more time analysing that in the week in the run up to the game, and we saw that play out. And so a lot of people are saying, yeah, fantastic work by Whitelock. And don't get me wrong, he had a perfect 11 from 11 for his attacking lineouts. What no one's talking about is the fact that Strange was the guy that was running the defensive line out. And boy, oh boy, he did a number with his team, obviously. There on the Blues, 9 successful out of 19. And of those 9s, they weren't all clean ball either. So that perhaps, again, another statistic makes it look better than it perhaps even was.
And how good that you've got a player who's got a non-playing part in the squad that is still contributing in a major way. It's fantastic that they don't leave the guys who are not involved with either the match day 23 now. I think Quinton Strange may have been on the bench for the final, but the fact is, those guys, everybody is actually involved in making a decision, and it sort of gets to my second point about their win, just their attention to detail. Paul, every forward seemed to know what was going on, whether they were carrying, they knew exactly where to offload. There was a great little example of it. I think Tamati Williams, who came off the bench as a replacement player, he'd hardly been on the field, and his first touch was basically to carry the ball a little bit, and he knew exactly where the runner was going to be and to where to pop the shoulder off, which created a little bit of space. Everybody knew their job, and you actually saw examples of that. And that's my other point in and around the passing game. The passing game of the two respective sides were like chalk and cheese. Of course, one lot were getting very good possession from Bryn Hall, but you've still got to put passes in the right places. And I can only think of one occasion where they threw it over the sideline, and that came through a bit of Blues pressure, but for most of the 80 minutes, it was the Blues that were passing under pressure, and the mistakes were coming.
Yeah, they were. And I mean, so looking at some of those players, actually, sorry, Quinton Strange wasn't even on the pitch, was he? It was Scott Barrett was on the pitch. So I'm not quite sure why they talked about, but Quinton Strange was the guy that did apparently, listening to reports afterwards, did a lot of work on that defensive line out. Scott Barrett, someone that I think a few of us have been suggesting shouldn't be should perhaps not be as high up in the rankings now or as before. 16 carries, was the top ball carrier across either team. Only 28 meters, but hey, that's a lot of work to get through on that side of things. Another player that people have been talking a lot about, especially in the backs, is Fainga'anuku, and whether he'll come straight into the All Black contention or All Black starting team now. 14 runs for 113 meters was the most of any player, even more than Will Jordan in that one. So whilst those players put the case forward for why they got selected for the All Blacks, there were a couple of players who, there've been suggestions that they wouldn't have been selected for the All Blacks after this one. I guess we're talking Blues props essentially here, aren't we? Carl Tuanakafi and Ofa Tongafasi didn't have the best game when they came off the bench, did they?
No, not really. You really wanted some impact from your bench, and it really didn't come. If you look at the Crusaders, the mileage they got, especially from the front row guys of McAllister, Williams, and Newell, was just really, really good impact at scrum time. These guys, I think they pulled a penalty in the second half, which I think Richie Mo'unga converted into 3 points. But in terms of the work rate of the Blues props, you really hardly saw any of those 4 props that were really involved in the game. Lalala Hodgman, who I thought was probably the best out of all the props, but Tunukuiafi and Tuangafasi, I thought were very, very poor. No real impact whatsoever.
Yep. And folks, with obviously the as I said, with not much rugby next weekend, we'll be leaving our look at the All Blacks versus the Ireland series until next Monday evening, where we will look at that squad and try and pick our match day 23 for the All Blacks, and also preview the Maori All Blacks versus Ireland. So that will be on the show next week, folks. So we won't dive too much down that All Blacks rabbit hole off the back of this game. As I say, Crusaders did their homework, disrupted that the platform for the Blues. Also did a lot of work at the breakdown where the Blues have been dominant pretty much this season, and one of the points that was made on the Waddle podcast review was that there are no Crusaders loosies in the All Black squad, obviously with Blackadder being injured and unavailable. But up against what is a All Black back loose forward trio of because Choate started, but in the second half it was Akiriwani, Hoskins Tutu, and Dalton Papali'i, all three in that All Black squad, getting outplayed by Christie, Cullen Grace, and Pablo Matera there. Showing that, and one of the points you've made about Razor is that he hasn't always had the perfect cattle, but he makes the best out of the cattle he's got. And that was a good example there with that one. Now, look, Pablo Matera, somebody that a few years ago was perhaps in quite a few people's World 15 in that number 6 jersey, but still, the other two, as I say, overlooked by the All Blacks and yet outdoing their All Blacks opposition in this one. Any final things you want to say about this game? Because I think first off, hat tip to the Crusaders. 2 weeks on the bounce, where they have faced the two best challengers in New Zealand, and both times have peaked just at the right time of the season and have shut down those two teams in a very effective way and won both games by a long way before the end of the game, which perhaps not on the scoreboard, but in the style of play. So, yeah, you've got a hat tip to how the Crusaders organisation as a whole have peaked for those two games.
Yeah, Paul, just probably a few things just to unpack about Super Rugby Aotearoa and especially the Crusaders. Listen, all the very best to Bryn Hall, who played his final game for the Crusaders and is heading overseas. I also believe David Havili could be heading overseas at the end of the year, just unconfirmed at this stage. Awesome contributors to the Crusaders, and 6 titles in a row, beg your pardon, is just truly amazing in this modern day. And when you consider the movement of players, you could have accused the Crusaders of having all the All Blacks in their stable, several years ago. But Robinson has shown he's got this ability to bring young guys through. You've seen, we spoke about those young front rowers, but don't forget he also brought in Dom Gardner and also Zach Gallagher, 2 young locks, which he moved or used during the season. So congratulations to the Crusaders and their coaching staff and their supporters. But also the Blues, listen, it's not a bad season. This will be like a rock in their backbone, knowing that they had home advantage. But I did see I saw some warning signs, especially in the last 20 minutes of the Brumbies game, where they got dominated in that set piece area and really just hung on by the skin of their teeth. But that's suffice to say, not a bad season. I probably take a little bit of issue with John Kirwan, who reportedly said in the press today, despite the Blues going down, they could basically head off and basically put together a what's the word I'm looking for? Their own basically era of dominance. Jury's still out on that one. To be honest, Paul, even the Blues, I suspect they might be losing a couple of players at the end of the season. We know that Josh Goodhue is heading up to Japan, although that's a like-for-like swap with Patrick Tuipulotu. I wouldn't imagine they'd lose too much of their squad, but on saying that, they might, Coach Leon McDonald might have to look at some areas. And just finally, probably an area
where one of the players for you there, Carl Tuinakapi, obviously is heading to France as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, he's heading off. And just one final thing, you speak about tipping your hat. I know we've spoken a lot about referees during the Super Rugby season, but listen, Ben O'Keefe came in for a bit of criticism of the way he ruled a few rulings from last week's semi-final. I'll tell you what, I think he did a great job of this final, and listen, a little bit of common sense in and around the two potential high tackles that could have been cards at the end of the day, but it was great that he made some on-field decisions. I hear he's heading off to a referees meeting over in Europe this week. He's probably going to get his butt kicked over that.
Well, yeah. So I'm not going to delve into those because, as you say, I agree with one of them. I slightly disagree. I mean, I agree it shouldn't be a card, but I do slightly disagree on the call on one of the others. But you say, as a whole, very good game from Ben O'Keefe off the back of an absolute shellacking in the what's the word I'm looking for in the sort of media, in the social media at least, for the game against the Brumbies from the previous weekend. Looking at it as a season overall, I think we did I did a kind of rating of some of the teams that didn't make the playoffs. But if you look at the finals, I think the Brumbies can hold their head high. They had a good season, going out to the form team of the year in the semi-finals. I think the Chiefs started with a hiss and a roar, and will feel that they fell off in the second half of the season, and will need to go away, lick their wounds, and figure out what happened there. Even though a semi-final is still a pass mark for Clayton and the team. The Blues, look, that's a winning run. They'll be very happy with that, and a final off the back of winning the Trans-Tasman competition next year is. I'm not sure that I would go as far as JK as saying a period of dominance, but I can see them having a period of being a strong, challenging team alongside and giving the Crusaders a run for their money. Because this Crusaders team isn't about to disappear and become also-rans anytime soon. A good season for Leon and the Blues as well. Definitely a more than a pass mark, a successful season for them, even if they did come up short in just one game at the end of the season, is how I would say that. Now, nocturnal rights. Those fans who booed the officials after the game need to look at themselves. Look, yes, booing the officials after the game, I'll agree with. However, during the game, when we had TJ on comms saying, "Oh, we don't like to hear booing of the kicker," boy, oh boy, look, we don't live in England, and yes, up north, in the British Isles, in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, you respect the kicker and you're quiet, and that's the tradition up there, and it's the right thing to do up there. Down here in New Zealand, we don't have that tradition. And you can say, "Paul, you're talking with an English accent. You don't know what you're talking about." Yes, I know. So what? But down here, making noise during the kicker is absolutely acceptable. It's how the crowds are down here. And each crowd and each country having its own cultures, its different behaviors, I think is a good thing. And different diversity is a good thing on the whole, said Mr. Woke here. Look, when you have a New Zealand crowd that starts booing you, you know that they respect you. It shows you that they're scared that you actually might be a challenger. If they're not booing you and they're quiet, well, that's when they're like, "We've won this game, we don't care." So booing in New Zealand is a sign of respect. No, clearly not for the referees after the game, but during the game it is. And I'm all for that personally. Stephen, you're on mute, but so people can't hear or see you're laughing at my jokes or your comments. But what's your thoughts on this one?
No. I was just sort of keeping a little bit of background noise at my place. So listen, I agree with you. You know, depending on who the home team is playing, if they're booing the opposition when they run out, to me that just shows a little bit of respect that they're actually a little bit on edge about who they're actually playing. Now, if a team that runs out, if a team that actually runs out and the local fans think, oh yeah, this is going to be an easy win. They probably won't even bother booing them. They'll still carry on sipping their beers or whatever they're doing in the stand and won't worry too much about it. So I think the higher the stakes, the more involved people tend to get a little bit involved in it, a little bit like a referee, makes a decision that's perceived as not going the way of the home fans. All of a sudden, they bring the boo factor out and boo or a knock on that's been missed. It's just the way it is. I think it's just the stakes at that particular time. I'm actually not too fussed about it, but one thing I kind of don't agree with. I was listening to a little bit of Sports Talkback Radio today, and there was a caller from Christchurch who basically had a bit of a moan about the amount of booing there was, and I actually thought that was quite hilarious. Having been to Lancaster Park, having been to the Addington Showgrounds to support visiting teams, and I can tell you it can get pretty rough down there at times. But you know what? You take a deep breath and you go, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And look, booing a decision during the game, absolutely, it's all a bit of pantomime for me. Booing after the game. Look, no. Once the whistle's been blown, once you come back over that white line, you shake hands, you have beers, and you respect each other, and you respect the referee as well. So there we go. Nocturnal rights. Give the Highlanders hell, they deserved it. Well, sorry, mate, but yeah, we didn't actually. Oh, I guess yes. I didn't talk about the quarterfinalists, did I? Yeah, the Highlanders had a poor season. Let's be honest. Not Tony Brown's best, but there we go. On that one. A question mark in there from Maurice Bass. When will the Crusaders be stopped? Can't go on forever like this. Well, I think when they'll be stopped, well, they're not going to be stopped under Scott Robertson, put it that way. Because look, at the moment, he is a very good coach, attention to detail. He's bringing through players. He's brought through more players this season than he has done in any other previous season. That he's been coached, and he's shown he can cope with that. That was one of the things I questioned him about, whether that was going to be an issue for them when they played the Chiefs, and I got to do a post-match interview with him, and he's shown that, look, he can cope with that. They've had much more turnover this year than they have done before. So, look, I think their biggest problem is going to be when they change coach next. Is can they get someone else in who is capable of keeping this dynasty going? With the Crusaders, but for me, yeah, whilst he's there, so that means you've got at least another 2 year. Rugby World Cup next year, so you've got another year of it at least. Because I think everyone's expecting him to be the All Blacks head coach come 2024. Stephen,
I just think they're one of those franchises that the fact that they have created a dynasty, you will find that very, very good teams, like the All Blacks, they create this dynasty, they create this monster, and then everybody that comes on board wants to actually be part of that dynasty. We have a situation like that right here in Auckland where Ponsonby have won the Gallagher Shield so many times, and it's always the team to beat, and you find that a lot of good players gravitate to that team, and you can see that with Pablo Matera. Would he have gone to another New Zealand franchise? He was probably convinced that was the right team for him to go through. He probably looked at their dynasty and just thought, hey, that's the team I'm going to go to. And the other thing is they have a very good club rugby competition in Christchurch. They also have a very good secondary schools competition as well. Christchurch Boys High and Church Christ College, beg your pardon, are two sort of premier schools in the Christchurch region, and those two schools have produced a lot of All Blacks. So, yeah, to answer Mauricio, to answer your question, no, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. The standard may drop a little bit, but you can guarantee, I think they will always be one of those franchises. They're definitely not going to drop off the earth and all of a sudden become the fifth New Zealand franchise one year. I think they'll always be there or thereabouts, lurking with an intent, because they've created their own dynasty, and they're kind of a city that's a lot's happened outside rugby as well. A couple of earthquakes and of course the tragic circumstances, and with the gunman who entered a mosque down there. So they've, I think they're always a they're a city that kind of looks upon themselves as a little brother and look down a bit, but they've also got a strong franchise partner with both Canterbury and also Tasman. So when you think about it, those two teams, when you think of NPC level, are always there or thereabouts. So I hope that explains it for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And LB said, look, they said the same about Leinster. They lost 2 finals. Sure, Leinster lost 2 finals this year, but will they be back next year? You have to wait and see. So look, to me, we're not saying that the Crusaders will win the final every single year. What we are saying is they will be competitors every year. And some years they'll be slightly weaker competitors than others, but they'll never be the Highlanders down in 5th, like the Highlanders were this year, who were never, ever looking like being competitors for the title. And that's I guess that's the difference that we're kind of saying there. A bit like, I mean, in football, your Man Uniteds are always up there or thereabouts in that one as well. LB says, yeah, regions with strong farming communities usually do well. Yeah, yes and no. I think you've got to say that times are changing, my friend, there in that one, and that a lot of the players will come through first 15s of teams, and which means that quite a lot of the players will gravitate to centres, the larger centres, such as Auckland up to St Kitts, etc. But as Stephen said, those 2 good high schools in Christchurch plus Nelson Boys as well means that they should be okay down there in the long run. But so yeah, times do change, folks, and we've got to move with them. Talking of times changing, and this is sort of times changing in a very, very quick manner. We've got a couple of people asking us in the live chat about Australia potentially leaving Super Rugby. In this one now, Stephen, we're 1 year into this new format. And already we're getting told it might all be falling apart again. What do you sorry, Maurice, he says, yeah, what Man United, you must be smoking something. Man United lost that aura a long time ago, my friend. Well, that shows you how long it is since I've watched football. Sorry, Maurice, I'm not a football expert, but so there you go, my bad on that one. But yes, so Stephen, a few questions there on Super Rugby, and Christopher Edwards Bailey who's asking, will there ever see a Super Rugby versus URC playoff game? Well, Christopher, let's first discuss whether Super Rugby exists beyond next year before we actually decide if there'll be a playoff game. Stephen, what do you think of this of this news that's coming out of Australia?
Yeah, it came out of left field, wasn't it? That grenade was pretty much thrown by the Rugby Australia chairman, Hamish McLennan, and you wonder if maybe there's a little bit of maybe they're just a little bit agitated that they're not getting a bigger slice of the pie in terms of money. I know a lot of the talk, if you listen to a lot of the ex Wallabies out of Australia, a lot of them saying, gee, I'm not too sure if we should be doing that, because we want our players to get better, and the only way we can get better is actually to continue to play against New Zealand players. And I personally think both parties need each other, although from what I believe, New Zealand have also thrown their own hand grenade back. And to be honest, I just don't think that's helpful. But we know that the relationship has been a little strained over the last couple of seasons. I just find it hard to believe when they've just brought in the likes of Moana Pacifica, the Fijian Drua, why you would just basically decide to throw that hand grenade in and just let everything pass by the wayside. I'm pretty sure there is an alternate angle involved in this.
Yeah, John O'Connor, been a while since we've had you on the show, John, but he comments as, yeah, Super Rugby is a 3-month fight to see who gets to make the final and lose to the Crusaders. Absolutely true. Look, I agree. I think that Australian rugby and New Zealand rugby both need each other. Absolutely. There's lots of talk about bringing in Japan, etc. Now, look, Japan has just started up its own professional league. I'm sorry, folks, but Japan in the Super Rugby or sort of cross competition like that boat has sailed. The opportunity was there with the Sunwolves to then perhaps add some extra teams on top of that was there, and that unfortunately has just say that ship sailed. They blew it when they had the opportunity. So the look, both sides need each other. In some ways, I think New Zealand needs Australia more than Australia needs New Zealand, but that's up to debate and obviously an opinion. I understand that. Paul Cully in the Sydney Morning Herald has given the pros and cons from an Australian point of view of pulling out. And I thought this was kind of interesting. In this, he's gone, first off, there will be an Australian final every year, an Australian winner, which, let's be honest, Australians like, as we've seen in NRL and those ARL, etc. In those sort of competitions, they've got some big sports in Australia that are not international. And let's be honest, that's rugby union's sort of trump card over those ones. But clearly Australia's like that. 2, control. Boy, oh boy, that's a big one, because let's be honest, New Zealand has built Super Rugby, Super Rugby Pacific, and they were the people who the Drua and Moana Pacifica franchises negotiated with, and then afterwards they got the Australian sign-off. So look, I think that lack of having a say is something that they're upset about. And then rivalries. Blues versus the Brumbies is spicy, but it's nowhere near as spicy as Reds versus Brumbies, for example. But we agree with that in New Zealand as well. Look, the local derbies, etc. On the downside, money. Yes. And he says Australia will probably lose the Fiji and Drua. Apparently, the Drua have not been happy with how things went over in Australia. The crowds are much smaller than expected. Hence, that final game against the Chiefs, I think it was, that was moved at the last minute to Fiji. And then finally, the Wallabies coach and, as you say, Stephen, some of the ex-players aren't a fan of it because of testing players and growing them. But that control piece, I think, is one of the big pieces. So there's those three pieces on final, control, and rivalries. Control, clearly, if New Zealand Rugby was to work with Rugby Australia, and rather than this is how it is, sign off, that piece could be that piece could be mitigated. And I have ways that the other two could be. But for me, look, one of the problems with Super Rugby is it's changed every 2 to 3 years over the last decade. And from that point of view, it just needs to settle down into a format so that people can understand what it is. We've got a format now that's pretty much the same as NRL. Therefore, look, it's one that the sporting public in Australia and New Zealand are used to. I don't think it's a perfect format, but I think since we've got it, since it's one that people can recognise, look, let's just stick with it for a while, please, and let it grow, because to me, change again within 2 years would be the worst thing. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, Paul, something I'd like to see, and I know that the New Zealand Rugby Union would never go for it. I'd like to see a situation where you see a lot of internal movement around the super teams, where, say for example, if a Beauden Barrett wants to go and play for the Queensland Reds for a season, he can shoot over there, but still be selected by New Zealand Rugby. I think that'd just be a great opportunity for a couple of these sides, whether it be a Melbourne Rebels or a Western Force, to pick up a couple of really decent marquee players, so we can see a little bit of movement, and those players can still be selected for the All Blacks. That's something I would love to see. I mean, to say from a New Zealand point of view, it would create a heck of a lot more interest. For me, there were times that it was pretty hard work staying up to watch the late games from Australia, to stay up till about 12 o'clock to watch the Western Force play the Rebels. I'll be honest, I probably never ever did that. But if you know what I mean, if there's some New Zealand players, a couple of New Zealand marquee players running around, I'd probably stay up. On saying that, we've also pretty much heard from a lot of the New Zealand coaches during the year that we don't seem to have the quality that we did in the past with some of these super teams. So whether there's enough to go around, I don't really know. I think the New Zealand Rugby Union do like the fact that players are centrally contracted and they can do their best to keep them within the country under their cap.
Like, I think, to me, as you say, I think, there's this idea that you can only be selected for New Zealand, for the All Blacks, if you're in New Zealand, as long as the contract that you have releases you for things like training sessions, allows the All Blacks management to say you must rest this player. Then why not let them play in Australia or New Zealand? It's not a big deal. Vice versa, bring the Australians over here. I mean, look at someone like Jack Debrasini, okay? Somebody who was at the Rebels and was, let's be honest, we would thought not very good. Came across to play for Northland and did a fantastic job at Mitre 10 Cup level at the time, now Bunnings NPC, and got a contract with the Chiefs and looked decent at the Chiefs. A couple of those Australian guys coming over here and learning a bit also might not be a bad thing either. Long term, a strong Wallabies is a good thing for the All Blacks and for New Zealand rugby. Let's be honest, whilst we don't want to lose the Bledisloe, it might not be a bad thing for the interest in the sport and for the game if we did lose it for a year and then got it back again. Maybe lost it once every 10 years.
I agree, Paul. And they slowly are. To be fair, they are starting to slowly develop some depth as well. Even looking through the Australia A side, there were guys like Reece Hodge with Test experience, and obviously a lot of guys who'd performed for their franchises without making the main Australian side. But I must admit that Australian squad with the likes of the guys like Kurabete and Karevi and Quade Cooper, all of a sudden that side just looks like it's got some strength again and a little bit of punch to it.
And in all honesty, folks, I would not be surprised if Australia did say bugger off, we're going to try it, if they don't get what they're trying to get. I do believe this is mainly a bargaining thing to get a share of TV revenues. Now, the TV revenue numbers that have been put out there are not entirely clear because those numbers do also include, from a New Zealand point of view, the All Blacks and Bunnings NPC and the Farah Palmer Cup games as well. And over in Australia will also include various the Wallabies games and other things as well. So from that from that point of view, look, guys. Those don't take those numbers at total face value, but clearly New Zealand Rugby has more money to give to the Super Rugby teams than Australia does, and that's not going to end up with a balanced and competitive competition if we have one side having more money than the other. So to me, on that one, I think I do think that revenue sharing needs of some level needs to happen. And that New Zealand Rugby needs to understand that it is, New Zealand is an island, but it's not going to survive as a sport on its own. It needs to play. It needs strong teams to play, and it needs to work well with the Wallabies. And I wouldn't be surprised to say if the Wallabies did walk away and try and set up their own competition. Would it be successful? Maybe not. I think it could be a disaster, but I can see them doing it. What I think we need from a rugby point of view is just Super Rugby Pacific to stay as it is for another 4 to 8 years, and just let fans get used to it. In all honesty, somebody's asked us about average crowd attendance in the chat. I'll be honest, I have no idea what it's been like this season. Look, clearly. Fantastic final, and also, in all honesty, a sellout for the URC as well. Final, but I do believe they have COVID restrictions, and so therefore it's only a 50% stadium. But even so, it's a big stadium; it's a lot of people. So great sale for the final, but I'll be honest, I don't think that the numbers were good on the TV or crowd or at the grounds during the regular season.
Yeah, originally, Paul, from what I believe, it struggled initially, but it picked up as the season season developed, a little bit more interest. And I think what might have picked up, I think there was a surprise with everybody that the Australian teams were probably way more competitive than people thought they would be, which is a little bit of a surprise too. Why they'd want to pull out when all of a sudden you could see this rapid improvement from the Wallaby sides, and that's what I'm looking forward to next year. If these Wallaby teams are competitive next year, you just ask the question: why would you pull out now?
Yep, folks, we need to move on from this one and talk some Super Rugby. Sorry, not Super Rugby. Dear me,
United Pacific Championship Rugby.
No, not in URC either. No, Pacific 4 series, some women's rugby. Because at the weekend, the Black Ferns won their third game on the bounce, beating the USA to finish top of the Pacific 4 series, with Canada beating the Wallaroos to come second. With the USA beating the Wallaroos in the midweek, in round 2, that meant the USA finished third, with the Wallaroos finishing fourth. Overall, what does that mean from the kind of rankings? New Zealand remain number 2 overall in the world, ahead of France, who have moved up to third after Canada's loss. Yes, that's right. The France, who beat the Black Ferns twice last November, are ranked beneath the Black Ferns still. Canada dropped from third to fourth during this series, but England are number 1 on 96 points, 7 points clear of New Zealand, who are only 1.5 points clear of France. So New Zealand, France, and Canada are pretty close together in the rankings. Then there's a 10-point gap to the USA, who have climbed from 7th up to 5th. So it's been a good series for them. Australia have dropped from 6th down to 8th. So not a great series for them on that one. We were talking about this earlier today about the Black Ferns. Now, look, great for the Black Ferns to get 3 wins, but I think what this confirms is that you've basically got England, a gap, France, a gap, New Zealand, a gap, and then other people. Whilst New Zealand are kind of because France lost to England during the Women's Six Nations comfortably. So whilst the Black Ferns have got those 3 wins, it's good for morale. I think we're seeing that basically they're best of the rest. And it's still going to be very tough for them to come the Rugby World Cup. But we agreed there were 3 things that Wayne Smith needed to do with this Black Ferns team. One was to make it a happy environment. Now, if you've been over to patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio and listened to my interview, their post-match interview with Aisha and Ruby, the 2 wingers after game 2, you'll see that it is a happy environment. He's done that. Tick. 2, performances need to improve. And if you've listened to, I've gone blank. Soper, who's obviously very
Alice
vocal.
Soper, yeah.
Alice Soper, thank you. A very vocal women's champion. She went on the radio this morning and said, yeah, look, she could see how this team, the shapes, the fact that, they are moving forwards, which is good to see. So, yeah, look, the play has improved. And the final thing he had to do was rebuild confidence. Because obviously after those 4 losses, New Zealand had never, the Black Ferns had never had that run of results before. And have some Black Ferns were playing in this series having never won in a black jersey, which when I listened to the What's Allowed podcast, where he interviewed, I've gone blank, the number 9, Kendra Cottage, on that one, she talked about the fact that some of the girls had never won in a black jersey, and it was important to get those wins in there. I think what Wayne Smith has done, tick, tick, tick on the 3 things he really needed to do in this series, Stephen.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, it was a good way to finish with that win, 50-6 over the USA, and Aisha Letiaga. Just she's in a really hot run of form at the moment, taking her try as well. But I also like that they've got a little bit of punch in their back line with Duplessis and Demont. The captain has been really, really impressive, and also while she didn't play on the weekend, the young Les Baker with the hyphenated name. Olsen Baker, who's been a real find, and that's the great thing about it. All of a sudden, they're actually finding these players. Renee Holmes playing in the 15 jersey, getting more and more confident, scoring a brilliant 50-meter try off what was a really, really good spot tackle. She picked up the scraps and bolted in from 50 meters. So that's the thing. They're actually coming together really well. And all of a sudden, there's a group of new players that are starting to put their hand up. I was really impressed with Yan Wu, who started at lock as well. Really big, rangy girl. Can I say that? Solid rangy girl would probably be a better way to describe her, but just good with ball in hand. And, they're going to have to be really, really good in the physicality stakes when they do come up with the Frances and the Englands of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the other point here is, as you say, look, the Black Ferns are behind the development cycle they would have wanted coming into the Rugby World Cup. Let's be blunt. You wouldn't want to be debuting so many players this close to the Rugby World Cup, but COVID and basically the situation that they've ended up in with those losses have necessitated this. Also, a couple of injuries. I mean, Les Elder and Blackwell, the captain and co-captain from that November tour, both out, unavailable for this series as well. So yeah, look, it isn't where they would have wanted to be, but they're doing well considering where they were. The other piece here in this one that is when and where do the sevens players come back into this. Now, something that was said off camera, but it was basically at the post-match media conference. So I think it's fair to put it on the record because he's surrounded by journalists when he said this. Wayne Smith said, "Look, he gets his players back 2 weeks. He gets his sevens players back 2 weeks, kind of before the tournament. So it's or did like 2 weeks of proper training, something like that. Now he's got them for training things, but he hasn't got them for games, and that puts him in a very difficult situation. Let's be blunt. The way that you've got someone like Aisha, Ruby Tui going well on the other wing in the first 2 games as well, you got to question: will players like Portia Woodman actually be able to get back into this side? They're not part of we know there's a cultural rebuild. They're not part of that. There's a skills and a play style review. They're not part of that. Neither is Kelly Brazier, who is the Black Ferns 12 coming into on that November tour. Not Ruby Tui. There's 3 or 4 others as well from that sevens team who have been part of this. And if you ask any casual Black Ferns fan, or actually even any educated Black Ferns fan, you go, will Portia Woodman be selected for or be in the starting 15 for the Rugby World Cup? They'll go, yes. I'm not so sure, to be honest. I think she's got a bit of a battle on her hands.
Well, Paul, all of a sudden you've got to bet. You're talking about all these players. There's a battle for numbers all of a sudden, and that's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. Everybody's under pressure to actually make this team 4 months out, and I'm pretty sure Wayne Smith will have and his rest of his coaching staff will have a quiet little smile on their faces that they're now getting a competition within the squad.
Yeah, and look, folks, just so we're clear, and I'm not putting words into people's mouth. What he said was that he had for 2 weeks, and obviously that was going to be difficult. Everything else is my conjecture off the back of that. So interesting that on that one. So interesting what that'll happen. But yeah, look, it's been a good series for the Black Ferns. They're heading in the right direction, and let's just hope that. Let's hope that they're competitive come the Rugby World Cup, and we have a good Rugby World Cup, because I mean, the more teams that are competitive, the better. and we don't want to see England effectively walk away with that. Look, I'm English. I want England to win it, right? Let's be blunt. What I don't want to see is them just walk away with it in a procession, because that's just not good for the women's game. What is good for the women's game, though, is that they have forced. So England were the first country to go with these contracts on the 15 side. Obviously, we've seen the Black Ferns start to step that up now. What we've also had recent news is that Scotland are also stepping up with contracts as well. So, look, it's taking time. These things don't happen overnight. But clearly, England's move to professionalise the women's game at the international level, at least, and have that Premier 15s as well, is starting to force the other unions to take women's rugby more seriously and to put more money behind it, which for me is a good thing in this one. But we do need to get some. We do need to build up the interest, build up the crowds, and be able to fill bigger venues. Because let's be honest, people standing around the sideline in Tauranga is not an international venue. Waitakere and in Waitakere again, yes, there's a stand there, and they have played international sevens, the Oceania sevens there, but again, that's not really an international quality stadium. In all honesty, look up in Northland, where that is a proper stadium that's used for NPC and used for, well, at least semi-professional and has hosted Super Rugby and stuff up there. So that was a proper stadium. So that was the first time they played in a proper stadium after in those 3 rounds. So to me, I think we need to build they need to build the interest so that we can fill better stadiums. Am I talking about filling Eden Park? No, that's some time off. But some places like obviously Pocono's a bit dated, but filling some of these NPC grounds would be a good thing. I think. There we go. Christopher Bay, do you think World Rugby should allow women to play in the country that plays the most without being blocked by play internationally? No. I think women should be treated the same as the men in that, which is the same international regulations. Let's not try doing having different regulations, different things. We're obviously running a bit long, Stephen, and I know you want to talk about some Auckland Club Rugby.
Well, I was going to say I'm quite happy to put it on hold, but it'd be remiss of us not to mention the the United Rugby Championship. And I look back over the 2021 season, and it was really interesting. Obviously, South Africa joining the URC in 2021, but boy, you got to say what a turnaround for a South African team to come through and take out the United Rugby Championship this year, and full credit to the Stormers as one of our as our posters put before. We haven't won the too many championships, the Stormers, so it's good to see them take one out, and that might be revenge. A little bit of revenge for the Stormers who've sort of never quite got across the line, especially in Super Rugby.
Yeah, so I'm just scrolling back to try and find that comment by LB in the live chat. As you say, it's their first one in. It's the first time in 30 years, or the first time they've ever won. LB says, yes, in my 30 years, we've made finals but never won. So he's very happy with the Stormers. So congratulations on the Stormers with that one. I think everyone had Leinster nailed on to win this. So well done for the South African side, stopping Leinster along the way. There needs to be a global season, folks. Nothing new here, because the Rugby Championship is going to clash with the beginning of the URC. And so at some point that needs to be sorted out. Hey, it'll be interesting to see how they do sort that one out.
So this game was played at Cape Town Stadium, not Newlands?
Oh, geez, you put me on the spot here. I don't know.
I think it might have been, if it was half full at 30,000. I'm suggesting it might be that, because didn't they build a new stadium sort of just down the road? Interesting.
Yes, they did, and I'm talking now to try and scroll through my Tribe Sports app to find it, and I can't. Sorry, folks, too many things in here. URC, there we go. Full time, Stormers 18, the Bulls 13 at Cape Town Stadium. Yes, so down the road in the new stadium. So, folks, look, next week, as I say, we've got no Super Rugby to cover. Don't worry, we'll be looking forward to the, particularly to the All Blacks versus Ireland, and also Australia versus England. Obviously, the All Blacks, or New Zealand and Australian teams, the ones we know best. And being English, I'm obviously interested in their tour to Australia. Hopefully, I will be getting a media pass to the Maori All Blacks versus Ireland, and that's in Hamilton. So hopefully we'll be getting. I'll be able to bring you some coverage of that game. I'm also being invited onto a Irish podcast to talk about this series coming up as well. So lots of stuff coming up, even if there is no rugby. And obviously, we will talk about the Auckland club scene next week on the show, because Stephen's been doing some fantastic work getting round all of those games. He's doing a write-up of every single round on our Facebook page. So do check that out on New Zealand Sports Radio Facebook page as well, where you can get a review of every single round. And look, this was an exciting round this last weekend when you got games like East Tamaki, Manukau 22-22. So we've got a draw there. Pakuranga beating Marist, which is a bit of an upset by 22-19. So that was a close one as well. So some games not so close, but also Papitoetoe beating University 14-15. So look, there were some cracking results from the weekend, Stephen.
Yeah, that result there, the University Papitoetoe result, nobody actually saw that one coming. University had been unbeaten up until that point, so we're well over the halfway point. I think there's about five rounds to go in the round robin. I'll be heading out to Eden this weekend to watch them play East Tamaki, who are sitting down there in eighth place. So they'll be looking to probably bank a win and try and head a bit further up into the table. As for Eden, still looking for their first win of the season, but we'll catch up with our friend of the show, Amon Hallisey, who will be at Eden on the weekend. So, look out for NZ Sport Radio this Saturday. Hopefully we'll get some sunshine, unlike last weekend.
Yes, where it was very wet. So don't forget, folks, we've got the Stand-Off Show on a Wednesday evening where you can hear Brad and Richie crying about the state of Warriors Rugby League. And we'll be back on Monday evening with the DrivingMaul show to talk all things rugby union. So have a great week and stay safe, folks.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.